All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Wednesday, June 22nd. I am Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to the Maryland Community of Practice for Supporting Families webinar series. Our webinar today is switching from traditional to self-directed services. This session is being facilitated by Mary Ann Kane-Bresci, Parent and Director of Family Supports for DDA. Our special guests include Lori and Chris Krause, who are Eric Krause's parents. Eric, along with the support of his parents, self-direct his services. Monique Prestiani, Service Coordinator with Service Coordination, Inc., and Christy Colbreth, Statewide Coordinator of Self-Directed Services. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options to listen to the webinar, by computer and phone. If you have trouble hearing, you can try switching by clicking on the appropriate button in the audio section of your panel. We are recording the webinar and we'll make that available on the DDA website through YouTube. We'd like to hear from you and get your feedback on today's presentation and any suggestions you might have for future topics. Please use the question or chat box to the right and provide it there in the chat. If you have any questions related to your family's members' services, please contact your local regional office. And before we get started, we're going to do a few polls. So give me just a second and I will launch the first one, which is, where do you live? So it's multiple choice, and we have 4 regions in Maryland. We have Central, Eastern, Southern, and Western. And we'll give it a few more seconds. It looks like almost everybody's voted. Okay, we're going to close the poll and share. So it looks like 39% are in Central region, 10% are in Eastern, and 35% in Southern, and 16% in Western. And hide that. And we're going to do one more. What is your relationship to disability? So we have 4 responses. Yeah, you're a person with a developmental disability, a family member, coordinator of community services, DDA provider, or other. And looks like most of you voted, so we're going to close the poll and share the results. So we have 1% persons with developmental disability. We have 44% said they were family members, 19% said coordinator of community services, 20% said DDA provider, and 15% said other. So thank you for participating in the polls. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ann Kane-Bresci. How are you, Mary Ann?
Fine, Donna, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. On behalf of the Maryland Community Practice for Supporting Families, welcome to our webinar on switching from traditional to self-directed services. The purpose of this webinar series is to bring people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, families, and others together in an effort to connect and share information and ideas, all in order to support one another as we all move through our lives. Throughout this series, we have and we continue to discuss and address a variety of topics and concerns that people with disabilities and families face related to everyday life. We do this with invited guests and subject matter experts, and always through the lens of charting the LifeCourse. For those of you who aren't familiar with charting the LifeCourse, it is a set of universal principles and tools. Its fundamental principle states that all people have the right to live, love, learn, work, and play, and pursue their aspirations in the community. Charting LifeCourse was developed by the University of Missouri, Kansas City's Institute for Human Development Family-to-Family program. And it was developed to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families create a vision for their good life, to help them think about what they need to know and do, navigate and or develop supports and resources, and finally just really discover what it's going to take to live their lives of their choosing and to do it. At its core, Charting a Life Course views the person within the context of family, however defined, and community. The principles of self-direction align with these principles of Charting a Life Course in that self-direction supports the person to live his or her best life through choice and control over how their services are provided and who's being paid to provide them. Today, you're going to hear about a wonderful family, a family intent on supporting their son to live his best life, and how they made the decision, how and why they made the decision to switch his services from traditional to self-directed. In addition, we'll hear about the CCS's role in supporting a family in this transition, as well as we'll hear from a DDA representative to discuss the role of the support broker and DDA's regional office support leads. With that, please join me in welcoming our special guest. And we're going to begin first with Lori and Chris Krause. They are the proud parents of Eric, and Eric is a self-direction. He participates in self-direction. With that, let me ask you, welcome, Lori and Chris. I got a lot of these.
Hi.
Can we begin? Tell us about Eric, please.
Well, we'll start with the picture here. That is our family on the top right. That's Eric on the end on the left. He has a younger brother who's currently in the Army. He's an Army Ranger. On the left, you'll see Eric that is at his current job. He works part-time at Biggs and Featherbell Soap Company. Their soaps are actually sold in a lot of giant stores, Wegmans. They're our local company, and they've been really great with getting a job that's something that Eric can do. He works in the packaging department, working on the soap boxes and the bags that you see in the stores. And then on the bottom is a picture of Eric with his personal support staff member, Carl. Eric does play a little bit of piano, not as much as he used to, but as you can see, they're having a great time there. So, Eric is 24 years old. He has autism. He is nonverbal. He has receptive and expressive aphasia, and the expressive aphasia is worse than the receptive. He does use a communication app on his phone, but he's very prompt dependent to use it. And actually, Eric is very prompt dependent in a lot of aspects of his life, even on familiar tasks. Eric has always been one who likes to be correct or accurate in things that he does. And if he's not accurate or correct, it's a little frustrated. So even familiar tasks that he's been doing for many, many years, he's always looking to whoever's around him to make sure that he's doing it correctly. So again, he does get a little bit of frustrated, but that's actually gotten better for most things. But we just keep reassuring him, you know, that it's okay. You're doing things the right way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Can you tell us why, so he's in traditional services. He had been. Can you tell us why you switched from traditional to self-directed services?
Yeah, there's several reasons. We were probably in traditional services. What I wanted to mention is he transitioned in 2019, and there was a little bit of delay in his transition into DDA services. So he started in October 2019, and we went into traditional services with day habitation was our main thing, and that was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't bad, but the thing is, we were really interested in getting Eric employment and get a job. We know he's employable. Everyone tells us he's employable. We've been told that through the whole school. It's a matter of finding a job. At this point, we didn't have the job we have now. And the supported employment through traditional services was very limited. It seemed like they would provide a little bit of support at the beginning, but it was definitely designed to wane off. And we felt like it wasn't going to be very good for Eric. It wasn't going to be able to support him the full day. And so was one thing we were talking about. And then we were unable to obtain personal supports for when he was not in day hab. In other words, we were using the same vendor for that, but they were having trouble hiring people or getting people on board to give us the personal supports we were requesting. And, you know, towards the end there's a lack of communication or feedback from what's going on. Eric's expressive communication is very poor. So it's not like we could ask him how his day was, what he did and all that. We really relied on someone else telling us what he was doing. And as the picture shows, we didn't know. It's just like a blocks. We know we were in traditional services. So then put a head on it, COVID hit, right? So, you know, March 2020, services went to nothing basically, and that really, you know, made us start thinking harder about, well, you know, self-directed services. What's it about? What are we going to do? How can we do this? It seems like it could really help us out.
Yeah. Well, how did the switch go?
It went great. First of all, thank you, Monique, who really, she was our CCS. She was actually covering a loaner because we didn't have someone locally. So here she is out in Western Maryland. But she knew everything. She knew exactly how to get this to make it smooth. She was so knowledgeable about everything, helping us write goals and everything. She actually notified the regional manager, I believe, let them know that Eric was transitioning from one program to another, so hopefully there wouldn't be too much of a delay in getting these services approved. So in the meantime, while we were waiting for the DDA to approve the plan, she suggested let's talk to a support broker in the meantime, give us some tips on hiring staff. And then actually the plan was actually approved, I think, within a couple of days of our annual review date, but there's always the but. It took about 2 to 3 weeks for the regional office to get the actual paperwork to the FMS. And then once that was approved, our support broker suggested we'll start interviewing people, start hiring people. So we interviewed Carl, hired him right away, but we let him know that the FMS had not received the paperwork yet. And then there's all this paperwork that FMS needs for our support staff, background checks, paperwork. That took about almost another 3 to 4 weeks. So it's not a quick process from the time you're approved. There's all that extra stuff that you need to go through. But we finally made it, and it's been pretty smooth, I think. You know, thanks to our support workers, who've really been a wonderful support person through this whole process, and Monique as well.
Lori and Chris, in those 3-4 weeks in which he had yet to transition to self-directed services, what did life look like for him? Did he remain in traditional services until then? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So that's one of the things I would discuss later under challenges we had, is that we didn't know. So there was this transition period that's, you know, officially you're no longer eligible for services because you've been approved, traditional because you've been approved for self-directed, but we had no way of paying for the self-directed. So there was an overlap there that Monique helped us out with, that we were able to get a transition period where yes, you can still go to DayHab while you're waiting for the official approval for, you know, your own support services. It was a little touch and go. It's one of those areas that's, you know, probably never going to be 100% smooth when there is a transition, but it sounds like there's ways to work it out, which I think is very good.
Okay, great. Well, and I'm sorry I jumped the gun on that. Let's talk about, so tell us about the positive experiences you've had, that Eric's had and that you've had in self-direction.
Well, the biggest thing is more control of his daily activity. He does work twice a week, but then there's also the other community outings, going for walks, going to the mall, going to the movies. You know, let him pick out the choices that he would like to do for the day. We also get direct feedback from our personal support staff. We only have one, who's also our ongoing job support coach. And he gives us daily feedback on how Eric went. Did something make him frustrated? What's working? What's not working? We need to, and if something's not working, then we can try new things before we actually have to update the plan of care, you know, with the state. We can also utilize the DayHab services. Now, I'm not sure if every DayHab program will let you do that. We are still using our DayHab as a vendor, but Eric can still have some socialization with peers, you know, twice a week. So that's really, I think he seems to enjoy it. Still not getting a whole bunch of feedback on what they're doing. And then the other thing is the respite camps. Our DayHab provider does not handle pass-through funding through respite camps. And the provider that we use for our camps does not bill DDA directly. So when we were under traditional services, I called around pretty much every DayHab provider in the local area and asked them if they would just handle the money. And they said no, because they either don't do it or you're not currently, you know, Eric is not currently receiving services from us, so we don't want to handle just the pass-through funding. So we now, doing self-directed, and have, the respite camp will send us our invoice, and we, comes out of his DDA budget. And that really has been a blessing, because Eric really enjoys going to the camps, during the summer and a couple times throughout the year on the weekends.
Is there a difference that you see in Eric? Do you feel that he's happier while in self-directed versus the traditional services?
It's hard to say, because Eric is typically a happy person all around. So even if he's having a bad day, unless I see him coming in like really frustrated, I think that he's had a good day. But I think he really likes working. He gets so excited. You're going to work, I'm getting paid now. And he probably doesn't have a clue that he's doesn't understand I'm getting paid for this, but he's just so excited. You can see when he goes out and out with his personal support person. I'm going to the movies today, I'm going to the mall, I'm going to lunch. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, going to work.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. All right, challenges. Chris, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I got this all ready to go. So, honestly, it was scary at first. I go back to when Eric was transitioning in 2019. I think in 2017, I took a seminar, when we were allowed to get together and do that, about the transition process. And, SDS was one of the things they talked about. And this is like an hour-long seminar, and they covered the gamut of what all SDS does in about 15 minutes. And it just in my head. And I came walking out of there thinking, oh my God, there's no way we're going to be able to do this. That was 4 or 5 years ago. A lot's changed since then. And honestly, it didn't pan out. It was not that bad at all. Sounds scary because they throw all these acronyms, all these terms at you. There's people there to help you. There's people there to explain it to you. There's people there to do it. You just gotta understand it's going to become your responsibility to implement it and things like that. It was very, very, it's not as scary as we once thought it would be. One of the biggest challenges is probably for most people is finding and maintaining staff. I think we lucked out with Carl here because he's been very good and all that. But I know of some people who are, have trouble with that. For Eric, it's planning a daily activity, because since he does not express what he wants to do or what his needs are, we like to try and keep things different. So it's a matter of figuring out, you can only take a walk so many times a day. So you want to have other activities or try and find other activities to do. Whereas when you went to Dayhab, they were pretty good, at least before COVID, they were good at planning. We're going out a lot, but we could tell by tracking on his phone. They were going to different places. So there's a lack of opportunities for social group when you're doing one-on-one like this. It's always been a concern of mine, and I wish there would be ways to work around that or find out how to deal with that. But it is something I'm concerned about. Lori does all the paperwork, so I'll let her continue.
It was very overwhelming at first. There's just, besides the orientation paperwork that you have to fill out, and the paperwork that Carl had to fill out, you have to do the payroll every 2 weeks, you have mileage logs. The payroll is electronic, but the mileage and the vendor forms for our Dayhab, you have to email in. It would just be a lot easier if everything was just electronically. But our support broker has been great on guiding us through how to make sure we're doing things correctly. And our FMS has some resources on their website. And the FMS also sends out reminders, a couple of days before things are due, just to kind of remind you that, this is due soon. So once you get into a routine of things, it does definitely get a little bit easier. But up front, it just seems very overwhelming because there's just so much to do. And it doesn't really take as much time as I thought it was going to be. Definitely the support broker has been great and helping me stay on track as well.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let me ask you this. Now that you've gotten through it, what might you offer to other families or people themselves about, making this switch if they are at all interested?
I'm sure. Well, a lot of these tips actually came from Monique herself, so we're probably stealing some of her thunder. Sorry about that. When we contacted her and we told her about our things, we were coming up close to our annual review. So she suggested we transition at that time, because if you do it now as a modification, then you're going to have to do a review again about 2 or 3 months later is when I think we were due. So that made sense, because it reduced the burden of all the paperwork and things you had to do. So my understanding is that when you do a change like this, they're going to probably look at your application or your renewal process a lot closer the first time to make sure your needs that you're asking for actually match what your goals are. Then, like Lori had said, CCS contacted ahead of time, let them know our intent to change. to switch to direct services. And he also stressed about the goals being and objectives being really related to the services you're requesting. There, as we wanted both they had and also employment support. So we had to explain, have goals there that are related to employment and why there's needed and things like that. Obviously, you always should talk to other people who have been doing this. You network with people. There's a network called SDAN. Hopefully, if you're not familiar with them, please check them out. They're very, very good. I just recently found out about them last month. I'm still going through all the stuff they have on the website. They've got tons of information there. And one thing about our support brokers, we were speaking with them first, and we had the choice between two FMSs choose from, and our support broker was really helpful in helping us decide because they had experience with working with both of them, and they were able to provide very, very valuable input into that. So I found kind of useful.
Terrific. Okay. Well, both of you have mentioned Monique a couple of times already, so let's meet Monique. And Monique Prestiani, please welcome. And can you first of all start us off and just briefly talk about the difference between traditional and self-directed services, please?
Sure, absolutely. And so I think when we're talking about switching from a traditional provider service plan to a self-directed service plan, it's really important to understand what all it is that a provider is doing, because all of that responsibility and all of those things that the provider is doing as part of being a provider under DDA are things that now fall to a person who's self-directing their services. And so when you use traditional services, you select an agency or a provider, and they are so you have this agency, and then you have staff that work with your person, the individual, and that agency is responsible for hiring that staff, making sure that they're trained, that they have all of the DDA required training. They're responsible for that staff schedule. They determine pay, benefits for the staff, the agency. They kind of set all of those guidelines. Their HR policies, really anything that you think about when you are working for an employer. The agency is doing all of that. And then there's also the kind of part that goes into the waiver, which is the billing portion. And so in order for an agency or provider to be paid, they have to go through an approval process with DDA, and then they get paid directly from the waiver. So the participant, the individual, the person using services, doesn't really experience or have knowledge of that kind of background stuff going on of the billing portion of it, or how that kind of works for services. And then if a person has day services selected, they're often in groups. So day habilitation can be in groups up to, I want to say it's 15, and CDS are in groups. CDS stands for Community Development Services, are in groups up to 4 people. And so sometimes when you're in a group, the provider is focused on making sure that they are obtaining all of the individual in that group, that they are using their outcomes to guide services. And so when you are in a group, you're kind of sharing that time and sharing what you do, as opposed to it being specifically focused just directly on what the person might want to do. Another part of the PCP planning process, whether it's a revision or annual process, is that the provider does accept those services. They accept the services, they accept the outcomes, they accept the frequency, as all part of that kind of understanding that that's their responsibility. And sometimes that frequency can be influenced by the provider. So say, for example, somebody is using community development services and wants to volunteer. The person might want to volunteer 5 days a week, but the provider might not have the ability to support that person in volunteering 5 days a week. So the person has to either then decide, do I want to try to find a different provider who might be able to support my volunteering 5 days a week, or do I use this provider who can support maybe 3 days a week? And so the frequency might be something a little bit different than what they want. And it's not, definitively related specifically to that example. That's just something that can happen. And then so again, kind of in the background, the provider is doing all of this payroll, staffing, training, billing, they're doing all of that in the background. And then when you switch over to self-directed services, the individual self-directing with either their family or the support of their team, they then become responsible for all that. They become the employer on record, which means that they're responsible for interviewing and hiring their own staff. Or if they want to use a vendor, they're responsible for interviewing and hiring their vendors. They have to make sure that either their vendor or their staff have the required trainings from DDA in order to complete that role. So Lori and Chris talked a lot about their support broker. And so support brokers have to have a certification in order to complete that role. So you can't just, say, hey, my next door neighbor is going to be my support broker. They have to be somebody who has completed the training and is authorized by DDA to be that support broker. Now, if your next door neighbor wants to take the support broker training, that's a whole other conversation. So you have to make sure that your staff have those required trainings in order to utilize the services. And there are some services that are available for self-direction that come with specific training requirements. And I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, except they're mostly under the employment sections. There are some of those services that you can self-direct, but that staff needs specific trainings in order to work under those services. So you have to make sure that you know what those training requirements are in order to employ a staff for that particular service. And your CCS can help you with that, and or your support broker. Another thing that you have to do is you have to make sure you stay within your budget. And so what happens is whenever you transition to self-direction, you will do this either in your annual person-centered plan or through a person-centered plan revision. And your coordinator will enter the services into the computer system we use, which is LTSS Maryland, and it will give us a number that DDA would typically pay a provider for those same services. And then that number then becomes your budget. And you have to fit all of your staff wages, benefits, vendors, everything fits within that budget, and you're not able to go over that budget at all. You also have to stay within reasonable and customary rates that DDA has determined to be reasonable and customary. You can't say, well, I want to use Johnny as my staff and I want Johnny to make $100 an hour. That really exceeds what is reasonable and customary for our state, this type of work. And so DDA has set guidelines that we have to also stay within for those rates for vendors and staff. And they are available on the self-direction website, on DDA's self-direction website. And so you do this in planning and budgeting for all of your services. And then you also have to create staff and service schedule. So, before you might have gone to a day program from 9 to 3, and now you're like, well, I kind of want to sleep in until 10, and then maybe I want to go in the community and do this, and then I might want to have personal supports do this. So then you have to create that schedule. Either the person does, the family does, their team, it can be a collaboration. But that schedule is then up to you for services. And DDA does need to know what that schedule is so that we can justify services. Because if they say, oh, I want 30 hours of community development services and I want 30 hours of personal support, but then we reflect a schedule that only uses maybe a total of 20 hours, DDA is going to say, well, why are we requesting all of these services if they're not being utilized? So having that schedule is important for understanding how you're going to use services, showing DDA how you're going to use services, and then also allowing your staff to have a schedule that they know works for them. Because if you hire a staff and you want services from 5 to 9 p.m., and then your staff is like, oh, well, I can't work 5 to 9. I thought it was going to be like a 9 to 3. Well, then you have a whole nother situation where you kind of, the services weren't thought about before you hired the staff. And then for payments, or actually I skipped a step. And so all of us talk about the budget means that the individual has budget authority. This means that the individual determines how their budget is spent. Every single line item of the budget is up to the individual, family, and the team. And so this budget then gets submitted to DDA for review. When DDA approves the budget, it goes to the FMS, which is the Fiscal Management Service. And then all services are paid through the Fiscal Management Services as opposed to directly from the waiver. So the paychecks, vendor payments, they all come from whichever FMS the person selects. One of the other differences is, you know, back to that kind of volunteering example. If somebody wants to volunteer 5 days a week, if they're self-directing their services, they can really select where they're going to volunteer and how long they're going to volunteer, and then how many days per week they're going to volunteer. So it's 100% based on exactly what they want to do. It's not taking any other members of a group into consideration in that schedule, which is what you would do in a provider. And then when you self-direct your services, you still have to kind of track your progress to the outcomes that you select for yourself. So in continuing with using the volunteering as an example, if a person has an outcome to volunteer 5 days a week and create a volunteer schedule for that, then the family, the team, the individual are responsible for making sure they're tracking that progress so that we coordinators know how to let DDA know how you're doing on that progress. You know, if you're struggling to find volunteer opportunities, if you've changed your mind, you know, kind of any of those things, that's all really important. And you have to track that on your own, as opposed to at a provider would typically track that for you when you're going to a traditional service. And then one of the other things to keep in mind is that not all DDA services can be self-directed. There are very few of them that cannot be, but residential community living is a big one that cannot be self-directed. So if somebody needs the support or wants the support of a community, like an integrated community group home or residential services, that is something that is not self-directed through our current model. So that would be under a traditional service model. So that is something to keep in mind in considering what the services the person wants and needs are when thinking about switching to self-directed.
Terrific. Monique, I know that often folks, as they ponder this transition or even begin to think about it, that the budget is a big one for them. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Oh, no, not yet. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Not yet. Not yet. I apologize. First, talk about your role. I apologize. But we're going to get more to, we're going to talk a little bit more about the budget in just a moment. Sorry.
Sure, of course. So once you've kind of considered and decided that you would like to switch, you meaning the person that the services are for, once you've decided you want to switch to self-direction, your coordinator, your service coordinator, will help you make that transition. And so one of the things that we'll talk about is your good life. And we will write a person-centered plan surrounding your good life with outcomes that you're deciding that you want to work on, goals you're setting for yourselves, and then we'll discuss services that best support achieving those outcomes. So if somebody wants to work like Eric did, then we'll talk about job services that are available through self-direction, the requirements, the trainings that need to go along with that. If somebody is interested in, increasing their independence in their home, maybe learning how to do the dishes, learning how to cook dinner, that's something that personal supports would help with. So when we're talking about the person-centered plan, we're going to talk about the person's whole life and what they want for themselves so that we can best help them to match services with those outcomes. And then, sorry, that the wording of my next one just kind of threw me off. Understanding will help the team in person to understand which services you would hire staff for, which ones you would hire vendors for, and which ones are not available through self-direction. So what that means is, let's use the support broker role, for example. So you can hire a support broker to be a staff, and then they work directly for you. They have taxes withheld from their paycheck, and then there is a reasonable and customary rates guide for a support broker who is staff. You can also hire a support broker as a vendor. So a support broker can kind of be both roles. And then when they're a vendor, taxes are not withheld. They are responsible for that role themselves. And then the customary rates are a little bit different for vendors. And you can always self-direct a support broker, so that wouldn't be a service that you cannot self-direct. One of the services that would not be available to hire your staff for, to have it staff versus vendor, would be something like day habilitation. If a person wanted to go to a traditional day program, there's not a way to hire their own staff for a day habilitation program, because day habilitation programs are licensed by DDA and they have to meet certain licensure DDA requirements. So if a person wants to use day habilitation, that would be through a vendor, and that is something that Eric does as well. He still uses his day habilitation provider as a vendor through his self-directed plan. And again, services that are not able to be self-directed are largely just the residential group home type services. Most other services can be self-directed, and if there's a service you're interested in, your coordinator will help to let you know what roles and responsibilities come with that, either for staff, vendors, or if it can be self-directed. You know, we talked a little bit before about a schedule of services, and so that's something else that your coordinator, or if you choose to have a support broker, they can help you with it too, is to identify a schedule that works best for you. You know, maybe right now you're having to get up at 7:30 for your day program, and you're really not a morning person. You want to sleep until 9 and then have a slow wake up time, and maybe you're more of an evening person and you want to have services go a bit later. You know, that's something that you talk about through this planning process in order to develop a schedule that really works for something that the person wants, and that the schedule is really catered to them. If somebody talks about services that are vendored, like day habilitation, nursing is another vendored service, then your support or your coordinator will help you to figure out those services, whether they can be vendored, whether you're going to hire staff, or if either one is an option. If you want to hire a vendor, they'll help you identify some vendors that can facilitate that service. So like day habilitation, you might talk to 3 or 4 different providers in your area to see if they're willing, you know, and able to do vendoring services. And you're just as kind of when you're in a traditional program, if you want to interview a provider, it's the same kind of process. So it's that same process, it's just a little bit of a different verbiage, using them as a vendor as opposed to a provider. And then the coordinator will help the person to select the wages, any benefits that they're going to offer to staff, any training that the staff needs. Training is a line item that can be reimbursed, and then mileage, you know, kind of all of that stuff that comes with being the employer on record. That all goes into the budget, and your coordinator will help you with that. And if you have a support broker, support brokers can help with that as well. Ultimately, the coordinator writes the budget, but you can have guidance from a support broker on, you're like, well, what do I pay staff? I have no idea. You know, what was my provider paying them? Should I pay them the same? I don't know. And so coordinators, we can kind of tell you what DDA's pay ranges are, but really can't offer any recommendation within that guidance. And that's where your support broker might be able to offer you a little more support in determining what pay or benefits to offer your staff. And then as we go through the person-centered planning process, there are a number of documents that have to be completed for self-direction. And so when you keep in mind that for providers, they go through this entire application process with DDA, they get interviewed, they have on-site inspections, they have all of these things that they go through in order to become authorized to provide services through DDA. And so when somebody self-directs, they don't have to go through that process, but DDA wants to make sure that there is integrity in the services and that things are happening the way that they're supposed to be happening, that the way we're writing the plan, that it's being implemented that way. And so that's where this document, these documents come in to really help show that and to answer some specific questions that we might not have thought of, like, for example, like who's going to maintain employee records? You know, that is, that's a legal requirement. And so, you know, that's something that you might not be thinking of when you're self-directing services. So these forms really help to kind of guide that process. So some of those forms are family of staff, the self-directed services agreement, a service implementation plan, and then if you're going to offer benefits to your staff, a benefits policy. And then there are other tools that are used, like the health risk screening tool. And we do those whether it's a self-directed plan or whether it's a traditional plan. We do those all the time. But so those are all things that we use as tools to build this plan to support the person to achieve their good life.
Okay. If we can move on to the budget.
Yeah, budget.
Just take a moment or two, okay?
Yep. So, so these are all things that I've just already kind of mentioned. This is just kind of a glimpse of what the self-directed budget looks like. I used personal supports as an example here, where it talks about the hours per week they're going to work, the amount of hours they're going to work, and then the number of weeks in a year. And then this looks at their health benefits, personal time off, any other benefits that might be offered. If you're in Montgomery County, you do have to offer sick and safe leave. Training, so training can be CPR and first aid reimbursement, certified med tech reimbursement, whatever is applicable to the person or program. And then if there's any mileage reimbursement for transportation in the community, taxes. So these are all line items that a person has to be able to identify how much they're going to spend on those services, the pay, the benefits, and then also stay within their DDA budget. But your coordinator will go over that in depth with you as you transition to self-directed services and make sure that you stay within that those reasonable customary wages and the overall budget.
Monique, I can't thank you enough. This information that you've shared with us and your understanding about the various aspects is just so helpful. I know folks have questions, and we are going to take questions at the end. So with that, thank you, Monique. And I'd like to welcome Christy Culbreth, who is the statewide coordinator of self-directed services. Christy she's got a huge job here. She's going to talk about the FMS. She's also going to talk about the support broker. We're going to first talk about the support broker, the FMS, and then our regional office lead. So Christy, you're up.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Monique and I'm so sorry, Lori and Chris, I'm so sorry.
No.
Names are so hard for me. I think you guys did an excellent job kind of explaining the person's perspective and then the CCS. So that is fundamentally the team. If you have the person and your CCS, then you build your team out from there. So I'm going to talk about a couple other members of the team. Monique did a great job kind of highlighting some of the roles that a support broker can play. Support brokers are a tremendous service that you can choose to have. Support brokers can help you understand how to be the best employer you can be. They can help you find and interview and hire employees. They can help you create schedules for your employees, and they can help you create evaluation rubrics and to review those employees regularly. Support brokers can review timesheets and other payments that you need to make, and they can help you find resources that can help you live your best life. It's important to remember that support brokers do not sign or approve any payments, including timesheets, and they will never make decisions for you, but they can help you make the decisions that you want to make. During the transition to self-directed services, you can have access to your CCS and a support broker if you choose. The DDA will approve up to 15 hours of support broker services to help you get started as an employer. During this time, support brokers can help you and your team write your plan and budget, help find employees, and help you write any employee policies that you might want, including providing your employees benefits and things like that. We have, I'm so sorry, Miriam.
No, that's okay. You just let me know when you want me to move on.
Totally.
Okay.
We have a handbook for people who self-direct or are interested in self-directing on the DDA website. You can find it there, and there is a live link on the presentation that I believe you'll get today. So that's all. Next slide. I'm so sorry.
Okay. So now we're going to move into the fiscal management services.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So another member of your team, this is a required member of your team, is your fiscal management service. When I talk to people, I usually explain that it's kind of like a bank. Your FMS is chosen by the person and their team to support in self-direction. The FMS pays payroll and invoices for the people who are self-directing to approve. They approve them. People who self-direct approve them. The FMS pays them. They also keep track of money spent, and they send out reports, kind of like a bank statement, to the person and their team to help them stay in budget. And the FMS also helps the person get their employees ready to work. That might be tax paperwork, to make sure the employee has the right certifications and that criminal background checks are completed. Next slide.
Sure.
Now my favorite, I get to talk about the DDA and how we can help you self-direct. The DDA provides information, assistance, and guidance regarding self-direction and services. Once you've met with your team and created your plan and budget, you and your CCS submit that to the DDA for review. And the DDA reviews your plan and budget to make sure they follow the rules of the waiver and meet your needs. The DDA then sends the approved person-centered plan and budget to your team, including your FMS. So they need to have that so they know how to pay what you ask them to pay. We also keep that handbook that can be available. It's available on our website. It's in Spanish and English. That can help as a resource as you start looking into what else the DDA can support you with. We have self-directed leads in every office in Maryland who is there to support you. My notes are wrong. So we have a lead in every office. This is the person who can be your contact, your CCS's contact. If you have questions about what the DDA can approve and might not approve, they're a tremendous resource. I urge you to give these folks a call in your region if you have questions or concerns. You can also use me as a resource as well. I'm not sure my information is here, but we can make sure that my email address gets out there. So if you do have questions that feel bigger than your regional office, you can always include me as well.
Terrific.
We also know that you might need support from someone who has been there. So we have advocacy specialists in every region who can support you. Each advocacy specialist is someone who has their own disability. They each have lived experience using the same services that DDA waiver participants and other people with disabilities use, like Social Security, DOORS, and paratransit. This gives them real insider knowledge on how to navigate services that someone without disabilities might not have. The advocacy specialist can help people who are applying for DDA services, people who are already receiving them, and their families. Some of the things that advocacy specialists can help with are helping explain what services are available and help troubleshoot problems. And they can be available to present to community groups on topics such as transitioning youth, mental health, assistive technology, and self-direction.
Sure.
There are... I'm sorry.
We're out of sync today. Sorry for that.
This is my fault. I just like to talk. We have a lot of resources that are available. In the next slide, there is a list of links that can be available to you. Our handbook that we talked about, access to those regional office folks, the CCS providers that are available, and real notes about the advocacy specialists that I talked about.
Excellent. Excellent. Christy, thank you. This is wonderful information, and I'm sure people appreciate it. Before we get into, we want to take some questions, but before that, we got 3 short polls, but even before we get to that, I wanted to talk about the handouts that we have provided for you here today. So one, of course, is the PowerPoint in PDF format, but I've also included the trajectory, the Charting the Life Course trajectory, as well as the integrated support star. And what I would just encourage any of you who are, if you're thinking about making this transitioning to self-directed services, to first sit down and with your family member and really think about what is their good life? What are you hoping to achieve? And begin to just really flesh that out. And then with that, as challenges arise, use that integrated support star to really brainstorm around those challenges. And that way, when you come to, I think, knowing what the lay of the land is for you, I think you're better prepared to think about whether self-directed services is something that would work, that would be a good fit for your family member and for you. So it's there for you if you want it. So with that, Donna, before we get into questions, can we do the polls, please?
Yes, the 3rd poll is coming up. Are you or the person you support receiving services through DDA? And there's 3 responses: yes, no, I'm not sure.
And as you all are completing that poll, I do want to remind you that this webinar is scheduled to 12:30. We may not go, not 12:30, 1:30. We may not go as late as 1:30, but we just want to be sure to be able to catch your questions at the end. So don't be nervous about that. How's that poll coming, Donna?
Okay, we're going to close the poll. Okay. Looks like 78% said yes, 18% said no, and 4% said they weren't sure.
Okay.
Did you want to?
Yeah, let's just do the next 2. Be done with it.
Oh wait, the next one is satisfaction with the webinar, and the last one would be will you attend future webinars?
Okay.
So let's launch that. Okay, were you satisfied with this webinar? 3 responses: not satisfied, satisfied, greatly satisfied. Okay, looks like most voted. So are we ready to share?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to close it and share. We had a few people not satisfied. 63% said satisfied and 35% said greatly satisfied. So thank you for sharing that. And we're going to do the last one. Okay, depending on the topic, would you attend a future webinar? And then we have 3 responses: yes, no, maybe. Okay, most people responded. So I'm going to close the poll, share the results. It's like 97% said yes, no one said no,
Great.
and 3%.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow. Well, thank you, Donna, and thank you all for participating or completing those polls. So with that, we'd like to take questions. And we're fortunate to have Patricia Sestoki, who is the Director of Programs here at DDA. She has been monitoring the questions and she will ask them of our panelists. Patricia, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. There's a little delay where I'm at. But the first question is for the Crosses. And is, do you both have full-time jobs?
Say it again, please.
Do you both have full-time jobs?
I'm actually fortunate because my job allows me to work from home. Every time I'm flexible. And the reason I did that is because, well, after Eric got out of school, I was kind of having to be his personal support person. So,
yeah.
Especially during COVID closure. So I was just working a couple hours during the day. So I've been able to maintain my job from home, so, which helps me with having to do the paperwork, payroll and all that. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. So the next question, it says, say a provider can support you in an activity for only 3 days per week in self-direction. Could you hire another provider in addition to cover the remaining days? Chrissy?
You definitely can. So what I love about self-direction is that it makes sense for people who use it. So if you wanted to go to a day program, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Thursday, you wanted to have an employee come in and support you, and then on Friday, you wanted to go maybe to another provider who provides like a job development for you to help you find a job. You can do all of those things.
Great, thank you, Chrissy. The next one is, if support worker is a family member, can another family member do respite?
That is a great question. If one of your family members is a support broker, you cannot have another family member work for you.
Okay, and this either Marianne, you can answer this one, or Chrissy, but is it possible for the DDA FMS to do a webinar for providers about becoming a vendor for self-directed participants? I find that providers are hesitant to become vendors, especially for rehabilitation in some of those services.
Yeah, we're having a hard time hearing you with the background noise.
Oh, sorry.
That's
okay.
okay.
You want me to read again?
Yes, please. Thanks. Sorry.
No problem. So I think here is people wanting to know if DDA could also do some webinars for providers about becoming a vendor for self-directed participants. They find that providers are hesitant to become vendors, especially for rehabilitation in some think that self-direction is a different way for.
I think that's a great idea. I know we have a handful of providers on the call too. So if you, in the meantime, while we might be sorting out how to have a big webinar, if you have questions, if you are a provider agency who really wants to provide support to people who are self-directing, please contact me. I'm happy to get on the phone with you and talk about logistics to make that happen. We want people to have access to the kinds of services that they want.
Absolutely.
Yep. Right. The next question is, do you want to add anything to that, Marianne?
No, nope. I thank you, Chrissy. Yes, I think yes. Patricia, do you want to add anything more to that? I would say.
No, yeah, we definitely need to do that. I think that's a big ask, and I think it brings to the next question somebody's asking is, does DDA maintain a list of rehabilitation providers that accept individuals in self-direction? That would be a helpful step for families transitioning into self-direction. I think that is a really good question. I know we're working with updating our provider search and our provider information, and one of the things that we're adding to that is for the provider to list whether they're offering self-directed services. So we are working on that. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, excellent question. The next one is somebody said, thank you for this informative presentation. It's very helpful. How are you planning for the future long term? We have no family willing or able to take care of our child after we are no longer. Is that part of your planning? And I think this is for the crosses. You know, how are you guys planning long term?
Yes, that's always a big concern. It's something we've been grappling with a lot. And as we get older, it becomes more apparent. I've recently been attending a seminar from the Howard County Autism Society where there's had several groups of people talking about this issue as far as your estate planning, how to plan for a future or save for anyone who's going to need resources after you're gone, about guardianship, about ABLE accounts. And all those things are important. So there really can't be one answer to that question, but it's definitely something you should be looking into now. And it's good that you asked that question, but reach out to different resources. Ask Dan might have something coming up on that. Like I said, I just learned about them last month. I'm pouring through all their webinars that they have. They have one at least once a month, and they may have addressed that. I don't know, but yeah, it's a big concern. I feel you, and maybe it's something that DDA could, look into, someone providing guidance on that. That'd be a good thing to do.
And I just want to add that it is part of the self-directed services agreement at the end that we are discussing what happens. And I'm sorry, the family of staff agreement, the family of staff form. I had my forms mixed up. At the end of the family as staff form. Whether you have family as staff or not, that form is still reviewed and signed, and that we are making plans or identifying steps to take when family is no longer available. So that is part of the planning discussion as well. And while we're on family as staff, I wanted to also note that DDA recognizes family as being parents or siblings. So sometimes when we talk about family, we think about cousins, aunts, uncles, things like that. But on the family of staff form, it's recognized as a parent or sibling.
Thank you, Monique. Appreciate that. I think the next one is for Chrissy. My support broker has put in a well over 15 startup hours because of issue with CCS. Can we request they be reimbursed for the additional hours, even though it's not on the budget? I do have an allocated funds.
Yeah, let's connect. If you could shoot me an email, or I can give you my phone number right now. Maybe that would be helpful. I'll just say it out loud. 410-409-9158. Let's come up with a time to chat about what support is needed.
Christy, can you repeat your number one more time, please?
410-409-9158. And just leave me a voicemail if you can't get me.
Okay, Christy, the next one's for you. Does the FMS file the tax forms, i.e. W-2, and pay the federal, state, and local taxes, etc.?
That's a great question. Yes. So there are two separate things happening with the FMS. The first is employer taxes. So in your budget, you set aside a percentage of your budget to pay employer taxes to the state and federal government. Secondly, then employees are having taxes withheld, and that is done by the FMS in conjunction with that employee. So they fill out their appropriate tax forms, and the FMS withholds and sends out W-2s at the beginning of the year and things like that.
Great, thank you. The next one could be for Monique.
Oh, I just wanted to add on to Christy. That's for staff, not for vendors. So a vendor has to withhold their own taxes.
That's good, thanks.
Terrific, thanks.
Okay, here you guys can pair up again. This one says, if you are self-directing and you're using a vendor for your personal supports in CDS, Community Development Services, but yeah, you need nursing supports. How does that work? Does the vendor obtain the nurse, or do the participant themselves obtain the nurse? So, Christy, you want to go? Let's do Monique first, and then Christy, you can add to that.
I think I would say it depends what other services are being self-directed. So if a person is self-directing CDS and then say they have personal supports, they will need to have a nurse as part of their team in order to self-direct those personal supports. But typically, a provider would have a nursing supervising that CDS portion or day habilitation portion for when the person is there, because they're going to have their own employees that oversee those services. Is that you right, Chris?
Kind of. It is very confusing, right? Because nursing support services is a standalone service. So if you have an assessed need for a nurse, if your employees need to support you to give your medicine and things like that, then you do need to find a nurse, either a vendor or an employee, to do that. You can have an agreement with your day program, your CDS provider, to provide some care, I believe, to you. Let's chat about your very specific circumstance, because I don't want to tell you incorrectly about it. I think it is possible. I would hesitate to say that nursing services happen from a provider who's billing for it. It should be the delegated nurse if you have one. So let's chat. Shoot me an email. Give me a call. Let's talk about it.
All right. Thank you. The next one is, can a staff person also be a vendor for a portion of the time? For example, teacher who is doing community development and then doing independent living in the evening.
So in this scenario, an employee is also working for a vendor, or they are the vendor. Maybe I don't understand the question.
Right, a staff person is also a vendor. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For a portion of the time.
So I think two different things are happening. If you you can hire anyone you want, but if you're hiring a vendor also to provide a service, they are the employer for those direct support people. And so there are all kinds of complications. If you want to hire someone who is working for a vendor that you use, the vendor might not like that, and they might terminate employment for that person. They are in charge of that employment for the person. So I would make sure that if you want to do that, make sure that you're talking to everybody about what makes sense so that no one gets caught off guard when it comes to employment. But technically you can, if you're hiring, if you have your vendor, you're in charge of that. You have budget authority over that vendor, and you can hire whoever you want and be in charge of that person and their rates. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Christy. Please, if you need additional information, please know to contact Christy, and also know that there are some self-direction regional leads within each region that you can also go to. In the meantime, and of course, you have your coordinator of community services and your support broker. They have really good information they can add to that. Some folks have missed the webinar, came in late. Yes, this is being recorded. Yes, there are handouts that you get access to. If for any reason you're not able to pull them out, you can reach out to Donna Will or Marianne Kim Brushy for assistance with that. Also, somebody wanted to know the pros and cons of being a family member and wanted to know more about the explain more the family of staff form in detail. So, Christy, do you want to talk about the family of staff form?
Yeah, we love that in Maryland we want people to be supported in the ways that they want to be supported in, and sometimes that means hiring a family member to work for them. It does get complicated pretty quickly because the person is still the employer, and so I've seen really great scenarios where people can somehow separate their relationship with their parent or their sibling from their relationship as an employee. I think that's really important, and how support brokers and CCSs can really support people to have that balance of roles. But yeah, if you want to hire a family member, you can go through our family as staff form with your CCS and go through what relationship that person is to you, why it's important for you to hire your family member to be your employee, and what plans you might have in place should that family member be unable to work for you anymore. Monique, did you have anything else? Anything else that I forgot?
I think just talking about when family works as a support broker, that they cannot work as direct support staff. So on that family as staff form, there are 3 options. One says, no, I will not have any family working for me. One says my family will be my direct support staff. And then the third one says they'll be my support broker. And so you cannot have family as a support broker and direct support staff because that's considered a conflict of interest. And then to Christy's point, there are questions that you answer on the family as staff form that talk about how the family is best suited to, the family member is best suited to help the person integrate into their community, how they're going to help them achieve their outcomes, and just really helping to explain why they are the best person suited for the job.
Thank you, Monique and Christina. You guys are a good team. Go ahead, Christina.
Just one more thing, because I know this is something that comes up a lot. It's a common conception. So when family members work for you and they're supporting you to take medicine, right, and do some of the things that nurses do, there's a common misconception that your family member can go off the clock and just be mom and provide medicine. That's not really true. So if you're any employee, regardless of their relationship to you, if any employee is giving you medicine that you're not personally directing. So if you say, open this bottle, I take this bottle for this reason. That's not what I'm talking about. If the person is saying you need to take your medicine, here is all the medicine that you need to take, and they work for you, a nurse needs to be involved in that process, and that employee needs to be a certified medical technician, a CMT. So that's a common misconception that we hear sometimes, but if your employees, regardless of whether or not they're related to you or not, are supporting you with medicine, you need to have a nurse involved. That's important.
Right. And Christy, the person who had the question about the person as working as staff, they're going to reach out to you because it was not, they were not a vendor. So she's going to reach out to you directly. The next one is, this is for Mr. and Mrs. Cross. I found this process overwhelming. There's already so much paperwork and tracking to do. How do you manage?
It's a good question. It was very overwhelming in the beginning. I actually, when things are due, I actually put them on my Google Calendar so I remember. And good thing FMS sends out information of reminders that your payroll is due this week or your mileage forms are due this week. I keep a file with different files, one for our day hab provider and their vendor invoices. I keep a different file folder for our personal support staff. So you definitely have to be a little bit organized and have a lot of files. And I also talked to other people who have been through this and kind of got some of their ideas too on how they kind of stay organized. But utilize a support broker really was a key for us, just helping me to get organized in the beginning. And once you start doing it, it kind of can almost do it in your sleep, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you very much. That's a really good feedback. Great question. I think, Monique, what county do you work for? They want to know.
I work for Washington County.
Okay, and thank you. And Christy, can you please say your phone number one more time and slow so people can get you?
I sure can. Also, don't we just wish Monique was able to just work through the whole state?
Yeah.
410-409-9158. 409-9158.
And I'm thinking too that, Donna, when we send the handouts out, if it's possible to send Christy's information to folks, both her phone number and email. And I apologize going forward. Christy, I'm gonna have your contact information
That's
here.
entirely my fault. I'm so sorry.
Okay, I have a couple of more here. One says, I know that you're allowed $5,000 for goods and services, but only if you have a surplus of your budget. At what point during the fiscal year do you know that you have a surplus that you can take advantage of it? It seems to me that you would actually not really know as to when you can use it. So could you please provide some feedback on that?
I can take it. So something that I really love about self-direction is that you can prioritize what you need when you're planning in the first place. So like Monique mentioned, you kind of sort out the services that you need. You put that in LTSS with your CCS, and it spits out a number. And that's when you start writing your budget. At that point, you can include any goods and services that you need at that time and account for it when you're budgeting. So you're using cost savings, and so it does have to come out of that total amount. That's honestly the best way to do it if you can plan for it ahead of time, if you know you're going to need it. So if you know you're going to want to go to the gym 12 months of the year, you can go ahead and budget that in there. If you don't know if something comes up, there are a couple ways to know. We have some processes that allow you to quickly move money around and just let your FMS know. That's kind of during the Appendix K, like our health crisis that we are in, but the regional offices are willing to talk to you about changing your plan to add a good or service if you really need it and you know you have the extra funds to do it. We also made it possible to access some of the unallocated. So if you don't allocate all of your budget when you write your budget the first time, that money is available to you should you need it through a process that we can go through with you. So if you have questions about how to add a good or service in the middle of the year using money that you have, just reach out to your CCS, your support broker you might want at that meeting. And if you still have questions, you can reach out to the regional office and to me, and we can help out.
Great, thank you, Christy. I think some of you guys were here at the last webinar, and you had the president and a parent of Maryland SDAN, and she wanted to say hi to Mary and to everyone, and that SDAN can be reached out at the Maryland SDS.org or email their info at marylandsds.org or to join. So they're just a resource, and I know Mr. and Mrs. spoke about how you use it as a resource to you all. So I wanted just to make sure that I mentioned that because it's here in as a question, as a statement. And then Christina, somebody wanted to know, I think, does this apply to supplements? That was about not medicine. I think that was in your previous response. I'm not sure where this came from, but it was there.
Okay, maybe good and services or maybe not. If you have questions about what the waiver requires, you can ask our regional office leads really specifically what might be required, or you can reach out to me too.
Great. Marianne, I do not see any more questions in the chat box. I think someone just wanted to know, could this be recorded? It's yes. Could they have the handouts? Yes. Somebody wanted to know about the age of this service. They said this services start at 21, question mark. Christy?
All three of our waivers can be self-directed. So if you are eligible for a DDA waiver, you are eligible to self-direct that waiver, whether you are a minor or if you're an adult. It's great. It's like the best news that I can possibly give you guys today.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. So, Marianne, I think I've read every question that it was in the chat box. I don't see anything anymore, and I don't see any more dropping in. So I'll turn this back to you.
Thank you. Well, you did a great job, Patricia. Really appreciate it. And with that, I just want to thank all of you for being here.
Oh, wait. Thanks for coming in. I'm sorry. Okay. And we still have time. So let me just, can I just go over some of these things? Please confirm that family is only parent and sibling.
Parent, step parent.
Please confirm
sibling.
that family is only parent and siblings.
Per the form.
Christy, can you
hear me?
Answer that? Yes, we can hear you.
Relatives are defined as a natural or adoptive parent, step parent, or sibling.
Okay. The next one is, can a support worker that is a vendor, do they have a higher rate of pay than what's listed on the customary rate? And if so, where can I locate that?
That is a good question because it can get a little confusing, a reasonable and customary rates, because we have two different forms that look very similar. So we have a reasonable and customary rate for employees. So that takes out the taxes. So you can pay a support broker up to a certain amount. You can pay your personal support person up to a certain amount per hour. And then we have a vendor version of that. And so vendors can charge more, but they have to, like Monique mentioned, they are responsible for their employer taxes. They are responsible to report all of those things. So that rate, the rates are higher because vendors are required to report their earnings separately. And
okay, I think that concludes all the questions that I have.
Oh, you can find those forms on the self-directed DDA site.
Okay, I am going to turn this back over to you, Marianne.
Okay, great. Well, once again, I just want to thank Chris and Lori Krause for being here with us today and sharing yours and Eric's story. I want to thank Monique and Christy as well, and Patricia, and of course, thank all of you for showing up. I'm impressed that we still have 137 folks still on the line, which tells me this was an important webinar for people. And in the end, I want to invite you to join us for our next webinar to be determined, the date to be determined. It's going to take place in July, but on transition from school to adult life. Again, want to thank Deputy Secretary Bernie Simons for making all of this possible. And with that, have a great day and take care. Bye-bye.